23rd.
23rd, August 23rd, and we're recording Marc Burkhardt for the book. And Marc, what's your name?
Marc Burkhardt.
What's your permanent address?
You want the DC or the Maryland one? 3809 Calvert, Northwest, DC.
What about your parents' house in Ohio?
3420 Highwood, Stowe, Ohio.
And your date of birth?
28 April 53.
Okay, Marc, why don't you just tell me a little bit about your childhood, pain of growing up, your understanding of addiction, your spiritual path, some bizarre episodes, anything that you think would be important in this book that might help other addicts and might be interesting to record next to your photo. You talk. It's your page.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to talk about is for you.
I think as a child I was always expected to excel, and because I was the only son, the only male carrying the family name, and it was obvious early on in my education that I was gifted or higher intelligence or whatever, better adept at understanding the education process. And so I was expected to excel, and when I didn't excel, it was kind of like a reverse thing where if I did average, I got admonished, and if I excelled, it was like I was expected. I didn't get any kind of like positive strokes for that. And I did well in school, accomplished a lot of things, won a lot of respect through that. When I was younger, I would move from the city out to the suburbs. I continued to excel in school, but I also came in contact with, I think with myself for the first time. I started realizing that I didn't like being who I was. I evidently felt pressured or whatever, that uncomfortable feeling, that I found I could relieve by getting drunk and doing a lot of, rotten, mean, juvenile delinquent type things. Stealing cars and breaking in houses and fighting and just doing a lot of, just cutting up, shoplifting, things like that. And I had done that when I was younger, stealing bicycles and stuff, but I never, not on a scale I had gotten into it. Looking back on it, I think I just looked for thrills, something to stimulate me, something that was not approved, because I did a lot of things for approval that were acceptable. It's kind of like I had this alter ego or this Jekyll and Hyde. I was a great student and got A's and all that during the day, and then at night I would break in garages and steal cars and get drunk and wreck them and things like that. Never really thought twice about using things, finding pills in medicine chests, taking pills that friends of mine gave me, smoking marijuana when I didn't even smoke tobacco. Always ready to try something different, something new, getting involved with sex, just getting involved with thrills, riding motorcycles and just all around fun things to do. It seemed like fun then. And had immediate problems the first time I ever got loaded. And got sick, had to lie about what I did, and had to cover up the problems that I created. And didn't really think anything was wrong with that. And finally, when I started using narcotics, I was like 16, 17 years old, and it just seemed like the right thing to do. I did even more things I never thought I'd do. Got into theft, robberies, con games, frauds, a car theft, house burglary, things like that. Ended up in the military. Graduated from high school real well. Ended up in the military. Got real sick in the military. Ended up getting thrown out of the military, although it wasn't really. It didn't state it was drug related, but it was involved in discharge as drug related. Did get a good discharge and could get educational benefits. Tried going to college a number of times. All I can say is my whole life from, say, age 12 until I got clean at the age of 26, 27 was just, desperation, violence, denial, sickness, a lot of health problems, a lot of injuries, broken bones, a lot of wrecked vehicles, a lot of monetary losses incurred. Just went through jobs and careers and all that, women, places to live, and lifestyles. Changed drugs to try to find that magic cure. Quit using narcotics and started drinking liquor and going to doctors for pills. Ended up in a detox unit in Cleveland in 1979. Got involved in Narcotics Anonymous in October of 1979.
I'm going to have to delete Narcotics Anonymous. You say you got involved with recovery?
Recovery program.
Right.
And I haven't really changed that decision to stay clean, although I found that the disease involves a lot more than just using drugs. I used to think that drugs were not my problem. It was everybody else in the world that didn't like me or didn't like what I was doing, and I got loaded in order to cope with that kind of pressure. And when I was in the military, I developed an ulcer from drinking booze, and I thought I drank booze to cope with the rigors of military life. I was just some lower enlisted man, transient scum who had no real responsibilities, but it didn't matter to me. That was an excuse. And it wasn't until after I got into recovery that I realized that drugs are one of the ways that I cope with the problems that I had dealing with reality, and that it wasn't so much everybody else's problem as mine. It was my problem with everybody else. I had to deal with that, and it was very hard to do that, and I didn't have any real tools to do that with. I had to learn that. I had to basically learn how to live. And, here I was nearly 30 years old and had no idea of living. My favorite activities. Thanks. You remember? My favorite activities were stealing. I think that was my inability to accept reality on reality's terms. So, in the course of that, after a couple of years clean, I ended up in prison in Ohio for theft-related offenses, as they term it, and through miracles beyond my control, and I got out of prison early, and and all that time I'd maintained my recovery. I'd maintained contact with the people in my support group, and got more involved in service work in that support group. Got involved in production of literature for that particular group, and seemed to get a lot of positive reinforcement from that involvement. It allowed me to start developing ways to interact with people on a real basis, and also taught me a lot about myself. Got me involved in living life on life's terms, which was it was real hard for me to do. I always dealt with reality by altering my perception of it through drugs, or altering the reality around me by moving or running or changing lifestyles or whatever. So I know that as a disease, addiction demands that we avoid reality through whatever means. And even in my recovery, I found that I could avoid reality by traveling, or through sex, or through food, or through working, or through any number of things that would allow me to not look at where I was at in life, what I was doing. Would allow me to gloss over the negative aspects of my life at that present time and just continue on, basically avoiding reality. And I've gotten so, I think the disease demands that we end up really hurting ourselves. I got suicidal a couple times, a number of times in my recovery with overt suicide attempts. Entered counseling for that, which seemed to sort out a lot of that depression and denial and anger. And because I had no real way to prevent it and felt very unique because of that, and after I started getting in touch with that and talking to other people, I found this to be not so much a common occurrence, but it was something that happened to people that I knew, other recovering people, that they had gotten so to a point in their recovery where they're backed against the wall because they weren't willing to change, they weren't willing to adapt to reality, and the alternative to use any drugs was removed from them, for whatever reason. And it's like they talk about jails, institutions, and death. I've already been in jails and institutions, and death seemed like the only alternative. I'd been in a couple of mental institutions, and all that really taught me was that more lessons in better living through chemistry, and it never really offered me any solution to my problems. I was kind of hesitant to go seek some sort of psychological assistance when I did get depressed and suicidal, because of that old idea of nut houses don't treat you if you're nuts, they just treat you for acting nuts. And I operate under a lot of old truths that I developed, through distorted perceptions, and I had to revamp a lot of those. Eventually worked in the rehab treatment business for a few years, and got totally disgusted with that. On my own personal level, I think it damaged my recovery in certain ways, and it enhanced it in some ways, but it was very hard for me to maintain that dichotomy of work and my own personal recovery, and I didn't like that. It's just my own personal thought on it. It's been a long process of recovery. I know I'm still nowhere near where I could be. I found that I don't have to feel so far away from myself. I don't have to avoid reality now, even when I don't like to. Even though sometimes reality is really hard to take. I got to remember I had a hand in it. I had a part in it, and trying to correct those errors as they occur, or avoid them to begin with has been something I've learned to do, and I guess I'm getting pretty good at it because my life seems to sort itself out quite a bit. And the problems that occur now, I'm not afraid to ask for help. I'm not afraid to face those problems anymore. One time I would have, it was beyond my comprehension to deal with some of the things I deal with on a daily basis now, almost out of hand, and it's, I guess it's just another miracle recovery. I've told a lot of people that, I'm just another example that you can make a lot of mistakes and still stay clean, but I found that the mistakes I've had to find solutions to the mistakes, and I think that's helped me out a lot more, because I've never been one to be afraid to try something different, try something new. That might have been my primary motivation behind getting clean, was it was something different, something I'd never done before, because I could never remember staying clean for any amount of time other than if I was locked up, or I think I stayed straight once for about a week just to see what it was like, and it got real boring, so I got loaded. I knew that would be exciting, so this is like a whole new life for me. It's been like 9.5 years now, and it never ceases to amaze me how how good it can be, and it never ceases to amaze me how rotten things can get, and how I can really adapt and deal with them. I try to sell myself short. I still have some problems, like I don't feel I get pat on the back enough. I still feel like I'm under pressure to excel, although it's not from, I don't have much contact with my family. It's mostly peers and employers and things like that. But I think a lot of it I lay on myself too, because it's like the way I was trained as a child, that I should excel, and I shouldn't settle for just good enough, and just being average doesn't it's almost a negative rather than being something that's acceptable. And I'm still dealing with that, still coping with that, because it's real hard to get away from that. I learned something along the way that the way you're trained is the way you react under pressure, and I found I had I've really trained myself poorly in certain areas, and I'm working on retraining myself. I still think I have the same propensity for violence and mayhem and dishonesty, and my criminal mind is still there and still probably as good as it ever was. And but today I don't have to act on it, because I see how it would hinder my recovery, and it would make me feel a lot less in tune with myself than I am. And I think I've fought hard to get to that point, and I'm not willing to give that up now. And I think a lot of things that like I finally am able to accept myself to a certain degree. I don't have to I can look in a mirror. I don't have to double think myself or question my actions or my ideas. I do trust myself to a certain extent now, but it's taken a lot of work, and it's not been the easiest process I've ever had to go through. I think all I can leave with is I have a lot of hope now, whereas I never did. For a lot of years, even into the first part of my recovery, first couple 3 years, I had very little hope, and it was kind of like hope was forced on me. I had to have faith. I learned about faith by having it, and learned about surrendering by having no other alternatives to, no solutions to the problems at hand. So I had to let go of all that. And I guess by learning by doing, I've learned real well, and today I have a lot of hope, and I have a good ability to surrender now, and I feel comfortable with that. And I try to keep learning, because as long as I'm learning, I'm getting better.
Some things we talked about, the cockroaches in jail, going through the red lights trying to kill yourself. Just some specific examples in another area might be able to relate to.
Oh, okay.
Also going down the stream of life.
Oh yeah,
all that kind of stuff.
Philosophies. Yeah, I had a number of really some incidents that are vivid. I mean, there's a lot of things that happened to me over the years, but some are real vivid. I remember I was involved with this woman for three and a half years. And it was a basic, it was probably one of the thickest relationships I'd ever been involved in my life. This girl seemed on the surface, she seemed like my dream girl. She was young and lovely, and my favorite, little fat butt blonde with blue eyes, greenish blue eyes. But anyways, it was I was involved with her, and she was trying to make some attempt to stay clean, and we got through a breakup, and she disappeared, and I found her outside. She was hustling for Dilaudid, and it was a real sick scene. And I left. I was riding one of the motorcycles. I just took off, and I ran about 10 red lights, just about 80 miles an hour, running through town. Just totally didn't care, didn't give a fuck about anything, and was hoping that I would die, just because of the pain and the inability to accept the situation as it was. And I ended up at a friend of mine's place. Guy I rode with, he's also recovering, and he and I went out for a long ride that night, and I ended up having 5 flat tires on my bike, and it kept my mind off of the situation at hand. And eventually the woman, got made the effort to get clean again. We got back together, and it took a couple more years for the relationship to really go down the toilet hard. But it got me in touch with that inability to accept reality and wanting to see dying as an alternative to using. And after that, I had a couple more suicide attempts. I had seriously considered suicide, and it was almost comical when I look back on it, but it solved a lot of... It helped me accomplish some surrenders that I had to take care of at that time, concerning things I couldn't... I could no longer mess up any worse than they were, so I didn't know what to do, and I wanted to keep messing them up, and I had to let them go. What other vivid incidents? I was mentioning to someone earlier about just the consequences of my rotten living. I had health problems, and I can tell when it's going to rain like 2 days before it rains because of the broken bones and arthritis that I couldn't have from that. And, just a lot of just memories of really unpleasant situations and of situations that seemed pretty rotten at the time, but looking back on them, they're kind of humorous. I was involved in a fight in Europe, and a guy it was like I was outnumbered like 5-1 or 6-1 in this bar brawl, and I was loaded, and it was like a rotten night, and I didn't know what in the hell was going on. And a guy had my arm behind me, he had me in a hammerlock, and he was breaking my arm. And a guy I had been kicked in the teeth. I'd lost a couple teeth, and the guy that kicked my teeth in, I could see him, and I kept telling myself, I wish this guy would hurry up and break my arm so I could put this other guy's eye out, because at that point I couldn't move on him. And eventually I did, but it was just one of those situations where I was like, in the face of all this insanity, I was having like these cool thoughts of like, oh, I'm going to put this guy's eye out, and I want to like cut this guy, and I want to do this and do that, and it was like really, I was lucky to get out of the whole thing alive. And looking back on it, I don't know any real reason why I did, other than the fact that evidently there's some power greater than myself that was like keeping track of me that day. Waking up in emergency rooms, and sometimes I'll watch the television or something, and I have a scene of like, it's like a shot of what somebody would see looking up from a gurney in a hospital. There'd be heads all around, all peering down at them, and the light overhead and the ceiling. And I look at that and I have to chuckle, because I've been there. I've been waking up in emergency departments, not knowing like what city I'm in. All I know is that it was good dope. That's the only thing I knew for sure when I woke up. That it was really good. And my high just got blown when I opened my eyes. And it's just, I think it's kind of humorous. I still shudder when I hear cell doors shut on television or radio programs and stuff. Being in a prison system in Ohio where they don't really worry too much about inmates as long as they don't create any problems. One of the chief thrills that I had while in prison in Ohio was in the morning, I think about 6:30 in the morning, the lights would come on in the cell block, and the cells were painted like this gray color, kind of battleship gray, and the lights would come on, everything would be brown, and then immediately it would all turn gray, like the floor and all the surfaces in the cell, because it was covered with these little brown German cockroaches. And it was just like a carpet of them. It was kind of funny. But it also, demonstrated to me like the how rotten life can get if you want life to be real rotten. It's strange. It's like I've been in a lot of different situations over the years. I remember being I was a local union officer, the local president for a union, and even then, here I was, like I'm probably on my way up the ladder of corporate America or whatever, and I'd go to these union functions and I'd get like totally drunk and loaded and get in brawls with other delegates and other local presidents and create problems and, wake up across town, passed out in a parking lot in my car, and not know where the hell I was. And, just have all these bizarre things happen to me and still kind of dance through it. It just never ceases to amaze me. I tell people I've been from like the corporate boardroom to the penitentiary yard, and it doesn't mean a whole lot. And it's how I feel about myself. Where I'm at with me, and the rest of the world I'm not too worried about today. If it doesn't concern me, I don't worry about it. Which is kind of selfish, but then again, I got to remember that nobody's taking care of me but me. A lot of people may care about me, but the bottom line is, what am I going to do? And I had to develop a lot of spiritual beliefs, because I couldn't just rely on myself. I had to rely on other people for help. And it's kind of like I'm the one who has to take the action in my life, but I can seek guidance from others. And I got a lot of positive, just a lot of positive things in my life I learned from watching and talking to and listening to other people. And I developed like some aspects of my spiritual development over the years, even when I was using, by investigating different theologies and different attitudes along those lines of spiritual awareness. And I've come to find that there's a lot of common thought and a lot of religious ideas, a lot of spiritual training, and there's also a lot of I think the diversity is just a matter of like identifying each individual thing, but some things have really struck a chord with me and have really made sense to me in light of what I've been through and where I'm at in life. I gained a lot of knowledge through observing nature as a young kid coming up. My grandfather taught me a lot about nature and the outdoors and the balance of nature and ecology and that sort of thing, and how I fit into that. That played a lot in the development of my spirituality later on, although I wasn't so much aware of it as I am now. I got involved in Taoist philosophies and some of the concepts put forth there really seemed to fit in well with my life. How I would overcome obstacles by like a fluid resistance and flowing around them, not allowing them to impede my flow, but rather let them direct me, and I'd be able to adjust my attitude and my direction. Because of that, the influence would be there, but it wouldn't totally change me. It would just like alter my course a bit and force me to be innovative. Today I realize that a lot of things happen in my life in order to shape me to where I'm at today. I can look back on it and I can say, gee, that was rotten, or that was terrible that happened, but I know that without those things happening, I wouldn't be where I'm at. I could sit and wonder all day and all night about why did this guy die or that guy die and I didn't. The situations where we were all in the same kind of situation, or the same situation for that matter. And today I realize that there was a reason for that, and the reason is that I'm here able to understand that, to be able to like ask that question of myself is, that's part of that miracle that occurred. It just never ceases to amaze me about how I've gone through so many bizarre things, and my life has seemed, seemingly it's sorting out real nice. I'm almost, sometimes I get so goddamn middle America upstanding, baby boomer yuppie type lifestyle. It makes me ill, but it's usually about the time I just want to make some sort of drastic change in my life. It seems like the older I get, the less I want to make drastic changes. I'm getting kind of comfy and maybe I'm just getting old. I don't know. Maybe I'm just feeling old. But I'm pretty happy where I'm at so far today. It could be better, but it could be a hell of a lot worse, and I understand that today. I think
Great.
I'm about yabbered out, man.
Trying to think what I remember.
That's my thing.
Did you talk about Winter Johnson?
Yeah. Oh, my family problems. I've had a lot of problems with my family. It took my mother like 3 years for her, 3 years of my recovery for her to accept the fact that I was an addict and she could even have a son that was one of those. And my younger brother and I don't get along. I think he's probably as sick an addict as I ever was. Just through the course of his addiction and the problems he's caused for me in my life because of his addiction, I don't get along with him. I don't speak with him. I've had violent encounters with him on a number of occasions. And I can just see his disease getting worse every time I have contact with my family, and I get the reports on my brother, and I just wonder how far down is he going to get before he just makes that decision. And he's had contact with recovery in the past, but I guess he's having too much fun, getting beat up and thrown in jail, and losing jobs and things like that, the things that I went through. Although some of the things that he's gone through, I haven't gone through. So I don't know, I guess he's just got to walk his own path to get to where he's got to go to. He's got a pretty rotten path, though. I'm kind of glad it's his and not mine.
Talk about your obsession with motorcycles.
Yeah, I love motorcycles. Of all the things that...
And young girls all over the country.
Yeah.
3 babies in 1 year.
I did.
In 3 states.
Well, actually, a state and a district. Yeah, I found a lot of things to divert my attentions from using, although I'm still using. I have a daughter who's like 13 years old now. Her mother and I have lost contact years ago. And I don't know what's going on with that. I have this infant son born last October in Ohio. And I had to deal with a situation at that time where I was so into sexual activity that I had impregnated 3 women within the space of a few days. And near as I can tell, 2 of them on the same day. And I had to deal with the aftermath of that, as one of them miscarried and one opted for an abortion and the other one opted to have the child. So I had to deal with the extremes of pregnancy in the modern world, and it was pretty rough on me, and it forced me to reevaluate a lot of my attitudes about sex and responsibility and my involvement in it. And the attitudes I developed over the years with in regards to women were that they were nice items, they were something that was nice to have around. Because they're just another, like a pleasurable thing. And when they weren't pleasurable, when we got rid of them, it was like, I'd own these motorcycles that would need like major work, so I'd just get rid of the machine rather than deal with fixing it. And I'd be involved with these women that were a lot of fun for 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, whatever. And then when they weren't fun anymore, I'd get rid of them and find another one that wasn't such a headache. And I think it goes back to that attitude of, I should feel good all the time, and reality can't touch me when I'm insulated by all these things that make me feel good. I think I was 12 years old. I started drinking booze. I started fucking girls, and I started riding motorcycles. And I've cut back quite a bit on my girl fucking, and I don't drink booze anymore. And I still like motorcycles, and I'm involved in that sport on different levels. It gives me a lot of pleasure in ways that not just from riding them, but building them, racing them, common interests. I've developed a lot of friendships in the sport that fellows that really respect me and like me, and they've known me for years now, and they've never gotten loaded with me, and never seen me loaded. They like me anyway. They like me for who I am and not what I do, and I respect their opinions and their, I ask them for advice on different things, not just motorcycling related things, but some life things, and they respect me enough to ask me, advice on, life and motorcycling. So I guess I've learned to be a human to some extent, and I do like interacting with normal people, with the real world now. And I know at one time in my life, in my recovery, where I didn't have anything to do with people that were that were normal, that weren't recovering people, and I found that really limited my base of support, and it limited my perception of reality. It's kind of like when I was using, I had no concept of reality because I didn't have any dealings with people who were involved in reality. And I think I got lost in recovery, where I was like dealing with nobody but recovering people, and I didn't know where the bottom of the pool was, as it were. And, I think it's real good and real healthy for me to develop those friendships with normal people, because I found that for a long time I didn't like people, and I didn't like anybody else. I used to think that my opinion of other people was that they're usually a waste of good air, and whatever they had for me to get off of them was just about all that they were good for. And today I realize that it's not so negative, and it's not so cut and dried. There's still people that I wouldn't piss on their pant leg if it was on fire and I had to go. But I don't have that many people like that around me today, and I found it a lot easier just to avoid the problems of having to put up with people by not having any dealings with them, and eliminates a lot of problems for me. It probably eliminates a lot of problems for them too, because I'm not the nicest guy in the world. I still have the ability to be a rotten son of a bitch when I want to be, but I find less need to do that now. Maybe I'm just getting old and mellow, and I'm not as, I'm changing my ways or something. I don't know. There you go. Huh? I've actually did a little bit. Consider my Dallas spirituality. I like to say about changing where I lived. When I got off probation in Ohio, I decided to leave Ohio because it didn't seem like a real healthy place for me to be. And it's kind of like my chapter there was done, and different alternatives of where to move. I could have gone out west with my uncles, or I could have went down south with some friends of mine. I decided to come to the East Coast because I had a really good feeling about it when I'd come down here. I'd come down here once in my addiction, and I'd come down here to D.C. again in conjunction with a recovery-related event, and also for a motorcycle rally. So I got to really, get in touch with, the recovering community here, and the community of my peers in the normal world, and I liked it. And when the opportunity presented itself, I guess I went for it, and I really haven't looked back since. And when I go back up into Northeast Ohio, and I see how stagnated the area is, and how I could see, looking back on how stagnated I was, and I was kind of like trapped. And when I took that action to bust out of that, I think I did a lot for myself, not just outwardly but inwardly. I learned a lot about surrender, and I learned I could adapt, and even better than I thought I could. And I've done all right. I'm not complaining. I feel very good about where I'm at. I love it. I don't think I'd move anywhere unless I was somewhere where the weather was nicer, and it's pretty damn nice here. And I just feel real good about where I'm at, which is a big change from where I used to be, where I didn't feel good about anything. Where I could get up and judge, what a month was going to be like by what that morning looked like. Today I don't have to do that. Today I can just deal with what's going on right now and not worry so much about what might happen or what used to happen or what has already happened, but just deal with right now and live with it.